what are most voters in New Hampshire looking for from their representatives that represent them in Washington? Well, they want results. They want good constituent service. They want someone who who's more a workhorse than a show horse, someone who doesn't just try to always draw attention to themselves. But they want someone who can work with both political parties. And that's not a new expression here in New Hampshire. I mean, the folks who've lasted the longest in Washington, if you look at them from New Hampshire, have often been people who've been effective at working with Democrats if they were Republicans, or working with Republicans if they were Democrats. The late Congressman Jim Cleveland in the 2nd Congressional District comes to mind, certainly a Republican from New London who worked during Democratic administrations to accomplish quite a bit and get a lot of money, federal money, for New Hampshire, particularly in the transportation and environmental areas. And that's what you saw Junior Senator Kelly Ayotte, a Republican from Nashua, tried to do this past week. She's up for re-election in 2016. She's still got some time. It's been a rough and bumpy year politically for Ayotte. After the first couple of years where everything was smooth sailing, where she certainly was a darling of the Republican establishment down there, a prominent, attractive, well-spoken, conservative woman, somebody who they could promote very well, but she certainly has had some controversies. Her opposition to background checks before the purchase of guns after the Newtown tragedy certainly made her a target of gun control advocates here. And it's an issue that enjoys pretty broad support. She angered people on the left. Now she angered people on the right when she said she would support immigration reform and providing, at least over the long term, some kind of eventual pathway to citizenship for people who were here illegally, but they'd have to get to the back of the line and wait a long time. But that doesn't certainly make people on the right very angry. So what has she done in the past week to try and appear bipartisan? Well, she was one of only 10 Republican senators to go on board with legislation that would ban discrimination for sexual orientation in the workplace. All the Democrats in the Senate voted for it. She was only one of 10 who voted against it. One of the important things she did was sponsor an amendment that passed that prevents state and local governments from going after religious groups who are able to use an exemption from that discrimination. In other words, there are religious groups that consider homosexuality a sin, therefore don't want to employ folks who are outwardly homosexual. This prevents states and local governments from taking action against religious groups, which I think is an important amendment that Ayotte pursued for religious organizations and consistent with her belief system. But it's an issue on which she can point to when she runs again in 2016. Here's where I worked with Democrats on something that is very popular, and which is to say, support for same-sex marriage in New Hampshire is now very popular, now that we have this law. There's no question there's that constituency, and we now have an openly gay person running as a Republican for Congress in the 1st Congressional District, Dan Innes. Although he's not making his sexual orientation an issue, I think it tells you that that this issue has reached maturation politically, and there's a lot more people politically comfortable with the topic than there were before. We had Charlie Bass, a Republican who had opposed same-sex marriage in the past, come out in support of it once he left the Congress. So for Ayotte, it's a smart political play. It's probably politically a safe one as well, and a good issue where she can point to bipartisanship. She may need to do that as someone who's going to have a target on her back in 2016.